Welcome to Retail Management BUS302. This is our Week 7 Lecture 2 video, and we are talking about merchandise management this week. In our first lecture video, we just talked about merchandise management in a very broad sense, talked about breaking down that merchandise management into various categories, departments, maybe having a category captain, take charge, and then some evaluation techniques like the gross margin, return on investment. So we looked at ways that we could evaluate things. In this particular video, we're going to start off, we're going to pick up pretty much right where we, right at where we left off, where you're trying to figure out, okay, well, how much inventory do I need? And as you're trying to figure out that inventory amount, so, again, we talked about, where we left off on the last video, we talked about, there's these staple products and then there's fashion products, right? The staple products are going to be always the same. They're always going to be coming in. Everything else, they don't change very much. Those you can have, having a little backup stock might be good. But if the product is constantly available, you don't need to order a lot, right? Because you can get more in, especially if there's good service from the vendor, right? So, you might not need as much, and then we looked at the fashion side, or mentioned the fashion side. So here you got different sizes, you've got colors, you've got, when we're talking clothing, that you don't want to have a lot of backup stock because people might not like that color. What sizes do you need? Are you going to be right? So you have all these different areas. So trying to find that ideal inventory level can be hard. And this is where it takes some time and you got to get some experience in the field. And as you go through and you really work in retail management, if you're going to be more on the merchandising side, you get a feel for that and you get an idea of what's going on, right? But these are the main things that you got to think about, what's available and trade off. So as you think about those things, right, you have to then look at the model stock plan, right, for what kind of assortment do you want? So if these are some plans, right, this I believe is for you have different lengths. These are for clothes. You have some different store sizes, right? So right, all these different areas. So you're trying to figure out how many units you need. So you're going to have 429 units. What's that breakdown inside and length 1, 2, 3, right? So you have to figure out what the average is. And again, you get a feel for this, depending on, and it is depending on whatever the product is, but this would be a way that you could break that down. Now, once you figure out what you're going to have, that assortment, once you figure out what the appropriate inventory level is, you've got to create a control system for managing that inventory. Now, it's a lot easier for that staple merchandise. It's not always going to change, right? Especially if you have a normal cycle that people are buying, a normal amount people are buying, right? So you're going to keep a certain amount of stock, that base stock on hand, and then you'll have some backup, right? So think about like something like Tide. So, you might say, well, my shelf holds 10 Tide, 10 packages of Tide, right? So that's your base stock, whatever's out on the shelf. And you think, okay, well, I might want to just keep an extra, 8 in the back. So, or an extra 6 in the back, because they come in cases of 4. So, that's 16, works out well. So you're going to order 4, right? So you're going to have a little backup stock of what's out there. But as you're thinking about that backup stock, right? So how long is it going to take you to get the product from the vendor? Are they ever out of stock? Are they ever out, right? Is this a hot product? Is this a product that everybody wants and, high demand, right? So the more fluctuation there is, or the harder it is maybe to get from a vendor, the more backup stock you're going to want. So you have to build that in. And that's, again, where you're going to use some technology to help figure that out to control the inventory. So when we look at Lowe's, they're going to carry more backup stock, right, of a white paint, right, rather than a specialty paint, because, they know that they might need more white or they can tint it, those kind of things. So you're going to look at, what's the demand for a specific color, not so much for melon, right? We don't need that, but we do have a higher demand for white. So we might have more backup stock on that. Right? So you have to look at some of these things and just, again, learn your business and learn what you need and how to manage that. So when we look at these control systems now, one of the things that a lot of companies have done is they've moved to this automated replenishment called perpetual inventory, right? And this is really something, when I was working for Walmart, this is something that I was in charge of back in the early 1990s, was converting our store to a perpetual inventory management order system. So we had to get into our system, the shelf point, how many we had on the shelf. We had to figure out our rate of sale. We have to figure out our order point, all these different things. And then once we had it all input correctly, the system would calculate based on, it would watch our inventory, and when it hit to a certain point, it just automatically reordered. That is a really nice thing. So then you're just having to manage the one-offs. And by one-offs, I mean, okay, if you run out of product on the shelf, right? If you have an empty shelf, that's a problem. So that's where you have to go in and then manage the system and say, okay, we got to change some things, tweak some things, right? To make sure that doesn't happen, or it gives you time to maybe contact your vendor, right? So that's one of those things that we deal with these control systems. Now, part of this control system includes a budget, because you're going to need money to buy your merchandise, right? So if you're in charge of buying, especially in fashion merchandise, you're going to have an amount of, you're going to have a budget, and you're going to be allowed to buy a certain amount of product every month. And that product is going to be based on your sales forecast, right? And in your forecast, you're going to include any discounts that you're going to get. You're going to plan out the level of inventory you need to support. And then right at the end of the season, once that fashion style, at the end of the summer season, right, you're going to then look and say, okay, how did we really do? This was our plan. This is how we did, right? So you're going to use a budget plan. This would be another way to control things. Now, when you look at the budget plan, right, monthly sales, you're going to see okay, for this particular time, we expect, you have 100% of your sales, 21% is going to be in April, 12% in May, 12% in June, July, right? So you move through there, and then you get your monthly sales and you calculate it out. This is how you would do that with a budget system. Now, another way to look at it would be the open to buy system, where you're going to look at, now the open to buy system is nice because it tracks the merchandise flow, right? You've got the present inventory level, right? And then it figures the purchased merchandise delivery schedules and how much has been sold. So what the open to buy system does, it looks at the end of month, right? It says, okay, the end of month, this is what our plan was. Our plan was to have this much, or we figured, right? We started with $100. We purchased $300, gives us $400. We plan to have sales of, $300 to give us an end of $100. And so what happens with the open to buy system, it tells us, okay, if we went through and we had 150, right, and ending inventory instead of 100, we wouldn't be able to buy more product because we have $50 too much in inventory. So adjust your budget based on your end of month inventory. So it's kind of a nice system because it controls how much is coming in. The big thing that you want to do is check your sell-through, right? And say, okay, well, we had planned this, what was our actual? And when you're looking at the sell-through, actual versus planned, that will help you decide, do you need more inventory? Did you order too much inventory? And you can look through and with your plans and say, oh, we're at this point, maybe we need to do a markdown, right? So this idea of analyzing how you're doing at different points, either with the open to buy or a sell-through, is really important part of managing that inventory. Okay. So with the actual to plan, right? So we've got, again, these are some clothing items. We got the different. So our plan was to sell 20 in the small white silk V-necks. We sold 15. We're down 25%. Week 2, we had a plan of 20. We sold 10, right? So as we go through, we can start seeing where we're at as far as our actual to plan. So on the smaller side, we are stock number 1011, we aren't doing so well. On the 1012s, we are doing, definitely a little bit more, where we are over at our percentage, right? So that's where you would want to say, hey, that's the right product, and we would buy more of those. So that can help you as well as you analyze some of these things. So that's really this process that you're going to use to analyze that merchandise and everything else, right? So merchandise area. Now, when you're looking at the assortment and all, right? So you're looking at the assortment, right? These different stock products and everything. I'm just highlighting that. As you're looking at that, you definitely want to evaluate these using some sort of analysis. The ABC basically analysis identifies how well things are doing by SKU in the assortment plan. So you can rank your order, right? But you can rank the SKUs in order by sales or gross margin, inventory turnover. Remember the 80-20 principle. 80% of your profits comes from 20% of your goods or customers, right? So you want to find out what that 20% is so you can really make sure that you have those items. So, and then you classify your SKUs. So you definitely want to concentrate on those products that are going to provide you with the biggest returns or the most returns that you have. So that's a really important part of this whole process. The other thing that you want to do is think about your vendors using multi-attribute analysis, right? So look at your variables that you need to think about your vendors, and you would rank your vendors based on these whatever attributes that you need are important. For example, the reputation, their service, do they meet their delivery dates, the quality, markup, right? All these different things that you want to make sure are there. So you would rank then those are in the far left hand side, this area. I think you can see my cursor there, right? So these are your attributes, and then you would rank these as part of your the importance of each one of these. So, and then as you go through the brand, so the vendor reputation of brand A, 5, right? All these things. So you would rank these in order to make sure that you have that. And then you go through and do some of the evaluations, right? So, and these would be considered percentages, by the way. They shouldn't be numbers. I think they should be gross percentages, but and then you'd multiply everything else with probability and everything. So, all right. So this brings us to the end of video number 2. We'll pick up in video number 3.